The acting head of the USTDA, Thomas Hardy, recently held a roundtable with journalists in Washington, D.C., where he discussed a number of initiatives that are going on between the U.S. and different countries. I attended this event on behalf of Kurunzi News, and I began by asking him what they think about Kenya's recently enacted infrastructure fund, and as Kenya heads into the elections in just over a year, what the feeling is about the country's status and the stability of the economy and the environment for doing business from a socio-economic political standpoint. I also asked him in that tripartite question what they think about China's influence on Kenya's infrastructure development agenda. Later on, Mr. Hardy also fielded questions from a number of my colleagues from across the world, and here is a rundown of that session.
So this is a great honor to be here to talk about the role of USTDA and the strategic purpose of the U.S. Trade Development Agency. USTDA is foreign assistance with a purpose. Our purpose is clear. One is to support economic development in our partner countries around the world, but also do it in a way that advances U.S. interests. Those interests can be our national security strategic interests. They are also, as our name says, our trade interests. USTDA's early stage project preparation assistance is designed to make sure our partners in emerging markets have the best recommendations on implementing core infrastructure projects, but done in a way that positions American companies to provide trusted solutions and technologies that our partners need in markets around the world. For USTDA, that means using congressionally appropriated money to provide project preparation assistance for infrastructure. Infrastructure from USTDA's perspective are digital infrastructure projects, critical minerals, energy projects, transportation projects, areas where the US government can use a small amount of money to leverage and crowd in financing from the likes of the Development Finance Corporation, the Export-Import Bank, but as importantly, financiers from around the world. And we'll talk a little about that in some of the projects where we've financed at the early stage project preparation that have crowded in financing from InfraCredit in Nigeria, from multilateral development banks and regional banks. For USTDA, we're measured on two distinct measures. One is our export multiplier. That is, what is the return to the U.S. taxpayer? For USTDA, for every dollar we're investing in project preparation, we're generating over $200 in U.S. exports. But at the same time, we are also very cognizant of the importance of USTDA's work in supporting the long-term economic development of our partner markets, partner countries, both the public sector and private sector. And we have an extremely robust monitoring and evaluation program designed to make sure that, one, we are generating U.S. jobs, U.S. exports, but also that our investments lead to tangible economic development achievements and long-term economic growth in our partner countries around the world. I'm happy to talk about individual projects, but let me stop there and open it up for questions. But I think just remembering USTDA plays the earliest stage role in infrastructure development. This administration's put a high priority on engaging our partners on infrastructure development, bilateral close cooperation, and USTDA is making that investment to help our partners make better informed decisions on their infrastructure development priorities. As I look at Kenya, the driver for USTDA will be continued investment supporting the Kenyan private sector. The infrastructure is there. The financial institutions are looking at Kenya as a safe bet, if you will. So we're seeing more and more financing coming into Kenya. And I think for USTDA, the role we have is to invest in good projects that can bring more financing into the Kenyan market, but do it in a way that supports more U.S. Company engagement. I think that's a unique role where we've seen long-term U.S. company engagement. There's greater stability, but I think with that stability needs to be local stability in the Kenyan market. And I think what we see is positive signs from both the private sector and the financial markets that they see Kenya as a good market. In the near term, we're bringing over a delegation, going to your question about China versus the U.S. I think that an area in the port infrastructure, we're bringing a delegation from Kenya to the United States to introduce some port infrastructure solutions, financing options to upgrade their port infrastructure, and Kenya is the gateway for much of East Africa. And we want to make sure that U.S. companies, U.S. financing is there to help our Kenyan partners build out that infrastructure for greater trade between East Africa and the rest of the world.
There's a deep and substantive discussion going on in all of Nigeria right now amongst decision-maker influencers and the population right large, but why the United States is interested in Nigeria now and why. I get your message about America first. I understand it. You may understand it clearly in your mind. What I would like to know is, in your engagements, and please, one thing you haven't spoken about is, have you personally been on the ground? Who have you been meeting in places like Nigeria to put this message across about the key mission of USTDA? Have you been finding, amongst people you're engaging with, some confusion at all between the clear difference between USTDA and USAID in terms of the foreign assistance? I'd like to understand whether people really understand your mission the way you might understand it. Nigerians might not. So maybe make some of that clarity. Very recently, General Anderson from US Africa has been working really hard in his engagements with African leaders who've been telling him what they want. Key things: security. If you're bringing American investments, for them to prosper and to do well, they need to be secure. And there's a lot of insecurity on the continent of Africa. He just had an African military leaders conference in Angola, where a Nigerian company did explain about how they are improving the types of drones, for example, UAVs that they use that may not be like from Western countries and so on. So maybe also just speak to specifically what private sector investments you're looking at or feasibility studies you're looking at, some of those remote areas which do have instability, for example, in Nigeria. Sovereignty is a key issue being discussed, so as you are engaging and doing these studies or ideas are being brought to you that these are areas you might want to invest in, if they are America first interests, how are you balancing that for it to be perceived by the beneficiaries in West Africa, in Nigeria, as not infringing on those countries' sovereignties, and that you are actually going to be creating jobs and real outcomes for that?
Thank you, Oaks. We expect nothing more but multiple questions. Let me start with your first question. When I started at the U.S. Trade Development Agency 25 years ago, I was responsible for our Nigerian program. I've spent the last 20 plus years going back and forth to Nigeria. So I know it well. I've been involved in numerous projects that have had substantial impact on Nigeria. I think one of the areas I hold dear to my heart was a visit I made when I led this agency during President Trump's first term, is at the Nigeria Lagos Teaching Hospital. USTDA's investment led to the new oncology cancer treatment center. The investments USTDA is making are designed, as I wanted to make clear at the very beginning, we have two equal priorities. One is to support American companies, U.S. jobs, but as importantly is to support the economic growth of our partner countries. So don't read one over the other. Our priority is supporting U.S. companies, U.S. national security interests, but our national security interest aligned with Nigeria's national security interest. And I think that it's demonstrated, whether that's the Lagos Teaching Hospital, where we have helped make the investments possible for them to build out a cancer treatment center that is the envy of West Africa. Again, during President Trump's first term, we were involved in the Green Liquefied Natural Gas project, where we brought InfraCredit into finance LNG deployment, which is now a virtual pipeline moving gas to northern Nigeria. You may have seen just 2 days ago, we made an investment with Progas, looking to develop a small LNG terminal in southern Nigeria, which express purpose, is to create a virtual pipeline to northern Nigeria to create greater stability in the country and in the region. So I think one needs to remember, when we think about our investments, we're keep an eye on both sides of the ledger. And those are examples, whether that's healthcare, cancer treatment, whether that's energy security, or economic security, when we're talking about bringing greater consistency of energy into northern Nigeria, it provides greater security across the country. And I think, having been there more times than I can count, I know the security situations, but our approach is to be supporting good companies across Nigeria to make better informed investment decisions that can create greater commercial partnerships between Nigeria and the United States. And I think when you look at it through the lens of the investments we're making to support local economic development, it benefits both of us.
I'm very interested in hearing a little bit more about what makes this approach America First. Is this the first time you're announcing it? Is this branding the first time you're announcing it as America First approach to critical infrastructure from your agency?
For USTDA under this administration, we have two goals. One is to support our national security interests, but also support the economic growth of our partner countries. And I think that's the message that is a little bit different. I think in the past it's been purely economic, jobs and exports and development. I think what you're seeing in the investments we're making in emerging markets around the world is there's a lot more strategic national security interests, whether that be port infrastructure, whether that be critical minerals, ways to change the supply chain routes to ensure greater connectivity for U.S. industry on critical mineral supply chains. So I think it's doing a lot of what we've done in the past historically, but making sure that on a going forward basis that the investments we're making advance the U.S. national security interests. Sometimes that interest can be economic, but sometimes it's straight national security. When I think of the Philippines and the work we're doing in Subic Bay, I think that is a clear national security priority on a frontline area of the world. So it's not necessarily new, but I think it's how we have approached our investment in projects around the world in every market, whether that's Latin America, the Indo-Pacific, Africa, or the Middle East.
So how exactly is that how are you going to operationalize pushing out China, and do you expect some kind of backlash from them?
No, I think that what we are proposing is helping our partners make smart investment decisions. I think a perfect example is in Palau. Palau's network is Huawei ZTE. USTDA came in and provided Palau a roadmap for deploying an Open RAN solution using US and like-minded technology providers. Palau is now in the process of decommissioning their current communications network and building a brand new network based on Open RAN technology that is being built with American and international like-minded partners. We're not providing this is not a buy American or else, but what we are providing is a solution to an introduction and a roadmap for helping our partners invest in trusted solutions, whether that be network communication. A lot of work that USTDA has been investing in is undersea fiber optic cable across the Indo-Pacific region, through Malaysia, through the Pacific Islands. We were involved in the Southeast Asia, Middle East, Europe cable system. So what we're offering is an alternative. I think that the U.S. private sector, provide a trusted solution where governments and private sector can trust the flow of their data is secure. And I think what we're seeing is more and more governments wanting to invest in infrastructure where they have greater data sovereignty over their data that is not always there with our competitors.
We know USTDA has been supporting projects in Turkey as well, in areas like smart cities, digital infrastructure, and more recently cybersecurity and AI. And as far as I know, in May, the agency hosted a delegation from Turkey to explore a partnership with US companies and institutions in cybersecurity and AI. I would like to ask which areas do you see becoming USTD's biggest priorities in Turkey over the next few years? And also, are there any new initiatives or projects currently being considered for the country?
Thank you. I had a very good meeting with the delegation from Turkey when they were here on cybersecurity. I think that looking at the Turkey program, digital will remain a significant portion of our programming. I was in Turkey earlier this year and met with the Minister of Energy and came to a very strong consensus that USTDA had an important role to play as Turkey looks to invest in small modular reactor deployment, both in the public sector and private sector. So I would be keeping an eye out in the near future for announcements for USTDA, both in the public and private sector in nuclear. I think that the minister and his team were very clear of the importance that nuclear is going to play for baseload power in the country. And I think wanting to look at USTDA, we have a long history of success in Turkey, geothermal development. We were quite involved in geothermal development, in multiple geothermal projects, in digital projects. I think it's that history of success that has made the Ministry of Energy want to work more closely with USTDA to help American companies to recognize the opportunities that exist in Turkey for energy deployment. Early deployments of SMRs, there's a lot of work to be done. USTDA's job is to seed the ground for countries to be able to make those investment decisions when these reactors are ready for commercial deployment, fleet deployment. I think that one of the unique things in Turkey in particular is the strength of private industry. You have a lot of big private industries that have industrial capacity that may need both heat processing that's possible through nuclear energy plus the energy generation. So I think part of our work will be working with our Turkish government counterparts to make sure the regulations are in place to support deployment of SMRs, but also looking at private sector partners in Turkey to help them both think through how nuclear energy, small modular reactor can provide baseload power, but also heat generation for the industrial capacity for the Turkish economy. Turkish economy.
Can you tell us your current role, the agency's current role in Latin America? And I'm thinking about the future, maybe with the changes in leadership in countries like Colombia. And how do you ensure this is not only seen as competing with China and Russia?
Sure. I think that USTDA's program is going to increase significantly in Latin America. It has been slow for many, many years. I've reorganized the team, have brought in more staffing to help build out. The president's been very clear on the importance of the Western Hemisphere, and USTDA is responding. I was fortunate to host the president of Honduras at my office, I guess 2 months ago, where we made one of our first commitments in a number of years for the interoceanic corridor, looking at port development of the Sea of Cortez on the Pacific Island side. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that type. I know that with Colombia's elections, El Salvador, Ecuador, those are programs that had been slow for many, many years. And I think that that is changing. I think that we're seeing much closer engagement by the governments, by the private sector, wanting to find ways to work more closely with the United States. I'm heartened by the growth in our program already this year and the excitement that our partners in Latin America have to be working not only with USTDA, but with the US government across the board to support closer economic cooperation and ties between the US and our partners across the region. I will say one other area that you didn't ask about, but one of the big investments we made recently was the extension of the Medusa cable coming out of Spain, looking to get 22 countries in West Africa to Spain through the Medusa cable. I think that's an example of the role that the U.S. can play in helping to connect our partners across Latin America or across Sub-Saharan Africa into Europe and then on into the global digital space. So that's a unique opportunity. I know Senator Shaheen from New Hampshire was quite interested in this program. We signed that grant agreement on Capitol Hill with her team there, but it's a demonstration of supporting our partners in Sub-Saharan Africa, but doing it in a way that's advancing U.S. solutions, but also creating closer cooperation between Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the United States.
What can you tell us 14 months on from those MOUs that the president signed when he went on his first foreign visit to the Gulf? The Saudis with the Emiratis, they were among the most expensive signed, and I wonder what you may be able to update on that front, including the transfer of the media chips to both of those countries as well. And the second one is just on the back of the announcement yesterday that Syria, or the formal process, would begin to remove Syria from the SST, which is pretty historic and we haven't seen before. But then does that, walk me through the process, does that then open up avenues for your agency to step in?
Sure, let me start the first question. USTDA's program is exclusively dedicated to emerging markets. So we are not involved in any of the GCC Saudi MOU. So I can't really describe that because as an agency, we only operate in developing the middle-income economy. So we have not had any engagement. With respect to Syria, I think that as sanctions are lifted, there will be opportunities. I think the president seems to be clear that he wants to have closer engagement with the Syrian government by dint of the announcement of finding ways to lift the sanctions. I think for USTDA, we'll be looking to the private sector as the lead. We are designed to follow, but also spur private sector investment. So we'll want to make sure that we have the private sector going in side by side with us. And I think that will be a time and tell on that. I think it's a step in the right direction for USTDA to be thinking about what are the opportunities in Syria for infrastructure development, an economy that's been racked by years and years of war.
So what message would you like to share, not just with Philippine audience, but all over the world, especially for entrepreneurs, business leaders, and government leaders who are interested in partnering with USTDA?
I think this administration has made clear that the U.S. government is looking for ways to advance our geostrategic, geopolitical interests with friends, partners, and allies around the world. USTDA is on the front end of that engagement. We are the first mover on infrastructure development through project preparation assistance that will lay the groundwork for our partners to invest in critical infrastructure to support the country's long-term economic growth. And we've done this for 30 years, and it's a unique opportunity under this administration to have such focus on economic growth. If you look at the president's executive orders on critical minerals, on nuclear, on drone technology, across the board, he has laid out a very clear vision for what the U.S. Trade and Development Agency and what the U.S. government intends to do to support our partners' economic growth, and USTDA is on the front lines of making that happen.
How soon are you expecting, the kind of discussions you're having, how soon are you expecting that to, yield a functioning project, especially in Southeast Asia, if there's any?
These are long-term commitments. We know these are not tomorrow investments. I think that what you see is the U.S. government investing, as I said, in companies, in fuel sources. I think we're looking 5 to 10 years out. It's not an immediate, but I think, as I said, Congress created us to be that long-term plan of action, help to take technology risks, to help American technologies go into emerging markets. And SMR is a perfect example, but we recognize we may be 5, 10 years out. I think that 3 reactors reached criticality, which is an important step the president laid out by July 4th. That's an important step in this pathway, but there's a long road ahead. But the investment by the U.S. government and the investment by the private sector, more importantly, is what's going to drive the success of the U.S. SMR industry.
And that's because Singapore has its own strengths in financing,
Sure.
right, and in tech, and the U.S. Singapore do have a third country partnership program, right, for technical assistance and so on. So do you, under your office and your agency, do you see a role for Singapore or some kind of partnership going
Certainly,
forward?
I mean, Singapore is a financial powerhouse. I mean, for USTDA, we don't operate in Singapore just because of the development of the market, but I think that we look at Singapore and the financing and that Singapore brings to the broader Indo-Pacific ASEAN region as a driver for the opportunities for infrastructure investment. So I think we work closely. We have offices throughout the Indo-Pacific that we opened up during President Trump's first term that is a driver for USTDAs and build out. I know that we have our staff that's based in both the Philippines and Thailand that regularly go to Singapore to meet with U.S. companies there, but also the financial institutions to make sure that what we're doing can feed into the financing vision for the institutions in Singapore.